people, and I've got a big cart with all my shit on there, and he's just looking at me with that Boston cop look, which you can't tell is hello or I'm gonna get you kind of thing. And I get to the door and he goes, coming in from California? And I'm like, yes, officer. And he's like, welcome to Boston, man. Big smile. I'm like, thank you. He loads it into the taxi cab. And I get in the cab and I'm like, I will never do this again. I'll never smuggle drugs again. I absolutely will be good. I will not smuggle drugs again. And I deliver it and I get my money. And really that was the last, no, it wasn't the last time. But
Yeah, what was it like being a woman in the industry?
I took advantage of the looks and the sass and my fast, quick New York street mouth. I basically sort of shook my tail or wagged my tongue to get out and into a lot of things. If you were a woman back then, if you were a quiet woman, you were probably at the effect of the discrimination that was just de rigueur. It was the way it was. But if you were a ballsy woman, you caught people off guard.
So women have always been a part of the smuggling industries, and utilizing feminine fashion and beauty to accomplish the job is an age-old tradition. In the 17 and 1800s, British women smuggled animal bladders filled with contraband liquor under giant hoop skirts. Now, during American Prohibition in the 1920s, many women became rum runners, one of the few viable ways for women to earn a robust living. The smuggling industry is stressful, with extreme highs and lows. And like my dad, Peach Blossom tried to leave the smuggling industry more than once. In 1972, Peach Blossom gives up on the drug world and becomes a macrobiotic meditator.
I moved to Boston and I'm involved in very rigid kind of studying acupressure and acupuncture, and I go to the New England School of Acupuncture and I work in the macrobiotic community and I do all this stuff for a good 6 years. And then in 1978, and I'm single during this time, and I'm very busy doing all kinds of stuff. But in 1978, I couple with a man who was native Californian, but living in Boston, has a very prestigious job in the natural foods industry, as do I. And we couple and get pregnant. And right after the birth of my second son, my baby daddy there decides to go into big time pot smuggling, hash smuggling business in California. And we actually moved to California at that point. And that is exactly the world that we're in.
Where are you?
We moved to Studio City.
Oh, you're in LA.
LA. Mm-hmm. And then we moved to the Central Coast, where we put up greenhouses and we have 17 acres of growing.
Oh my God.
And this is 1979.
17 acres of growing. Holy shit.
In greenhouses. And we're growing magic mushrooms and pot. And we have German-trained attack dogs. And we have miles of fencing around our property.
Now, unlike my dad, Peach Blossom said she was around plenty of guns. Did you ever see a gun?
Oh, of course. We owned guns.
You owned guns? Mm-hmm. Oh, my dad
when we moved to Studio City, we were involved with pot, not cocaine. However, LA drug scene, they had guns. And they also were the kind of people that wanted to know where your family lived.
Oh, shit.
I got trained on a firearm.
Whoa.
Yeah. Just because there is that risk when you're involved in the black market. There are black market criminals that, it's an easy mark. Yeah. So, but I'm basically living in this project with my 2 little babies.
Oh my God.
Okay, and it's really crazy. And we make a lot of money. Enough for me to move off the pot ranch and take my babies even further north, because it's clear to me I can't raise babies on a pot ranch. This is really not working. I can't even have a babysitter. I can't have a friend. I can't, it's crazy.
Peach Blossom finally gets fed up and, taking her kids, leaves her husband in the pot farm, and she eventually quits the pot industry completely to work in the legal herb industry. First tea, and then medicinal herbs. The part of Peach Blossom's story that stays with me is her inability to get a babysitter because of her work-at-home situation. It's these small things we take for granted and don't think twice about that smugglers with kids have to consider. Smugglers like Peach Blossom and my dad are people trying to make a living, pay the mortgage, and occasionally have a date night without the kids. Another thing that strikes me about Peach Blossom's story is the fact that the seemingly more ruthless LA smuggling world she found herself in was an option for my dad. If my dad had been less adverse to violence and guns and hungry for the easy money cocaine brought, he could have worked in the LA smuggling subculture. If my dad had entered the world that Peach Blossom found herself in, guns would have been a part of my dad's life, and by default, our family's life. Today, Peach Blossom works in the medicinal cannabis industry in California, advocating the healing elements of the Schedule I drug, estimated by the federal government to have no medical benefits. Individual states and cities are challenging and changing cannabis laws to reflect growing evidence of cannabis's medical applications.
Cannabis has been the poster child plant for our generation. Absolutely came out and said, we are going to change a whole lot of things. And cannabis has been leading us to do that. I really feel that way.
Yeah.
Change the laws, change the emotions, change the consciousness, change so much about our world. And that's what Cannabis the Queen does.
Coming up, I talk with Candy Can, another badass woman who worked in pot smuggling, but with much more harrowing consequences than Peach Blossom's. I'm Rainbow Valentine, and you're listening to Disorganized Crime, Smuggler's Daughter.
You've listened to every true crime podcast, lost days on the Zodiac Killer subreddit, and Googled so many serial killers you're probably on some watch list. By now you consider yourself a seasoned detective. There's just one thing missing. You've never been given a case to crack. Enter Solve, the world's first interactive murder mystery podcast that puts you at the center of the investigation. Each week on Solve, you'll be assigned a new case based on real true crimes that will test your skills as a detective. You'll interrogate new suspects, piece together evidence, and scour distinct crime scenes to track down murderers hiding in plain sight. Your cases are waiting for you. Solve is available now on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. One crime, 4 suspects. Can you solve it?
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's exciting episode of Questing for the Golden Nun. And now we join the infamous good benefactor with his able-bodied assistant, Toothpick.
Oh, Toothpick! Have the results from the...
This is an excerpt from Questing for the Golden Nun, an absurdist radio play I co-created and co-produced in the early 90s with a hippie theater community I've been a part of my whole life.
Are you a good nun or a bad nun?
We must stop the Golden Nun, for it is the key!
The key! The key! Let's board them!
I'm pretty sure we recorded Questing for the Golden Nun on a vintage 80s boombox where you use 2 fingers to press play and record at the same time. Take note, kids. This was made way before the internet or cell phones. Now, my hippie theater community is a creative paradise for weirdos, and many of the people involved are, like me, the children of the counterculture insiders. One friend calls us the hippie mafia, a perfect description. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Candy Can is the mother of a friend I've had since childhood, and she's a part of my hippie theater community. While producing this podcast, my mind and my dad's mind were blown to learn that Candy Can worked in the same smuggling network as my dad. My dad calls his crew disorganized crime. Candy Can calls it the anti-network network because everyone was in the same network, but nobody networked. Now, Candy Can worked in different roles than my dad, and her story reveals another side of the same story that my dad and inadvertently me were in.
You were never meant to know that I was a pot dealer, but I came out of the closet pretty violently. I got busted with just a horrible scene, so let me go back to the beginning. I was 13 years old and my brothers were in college. And in Wyoming, you could get a driver's license. So I got a driver's license and they threw pot in the trunk. And I would drive Mexican weed to the frat houses. For me, it was a liberation because I felt that marijuana was one of the best highs you could ever get. I'm a pot-loving human being, and I knew it from an early age.
Candy Can is 13, driving kilos of pot to frat houses in Wyoming, Colorado, and Arizona. Her brothers dealt the pot, and she was the driver. At 13, people. Now, when she was a little older, she started dealing herself.
I started selling pot in high school. And I sold pot to the rabbi's son, to the priest's son, to everybody's. Every kid bought pot for me, and somebody got busted by their parents. And they called the police.
Oh, my God.
And my father had the cops waiting at the house, and I saw them there, and I took off down the road, and I hitchhiked. And I got on a frozen French fry truck for Howard Johnson's. And we drive, and we get to Florida, and I call my brother, and my brother says, "It's okay. Dad forgives you. They're not going to arrest you. You should come back and go to college. You should come back and go to college." So he flew out, and we rode the train back. And I got home, and it was really bad, and the high school teacher said to me, "If there was acid in this apple, would you eat it?" And I said to him, "Yes."
Candy Can is super smart. She finished high school and college. She opens a psychedelic clothing store in Colorado. By owning and operating this store, she got to meet all sorts of interesting people. She's vague on the details on who and when everything got going, but much like my dad, she fell into a world of psychedelic people and smugglers. And she said that she and her crew had a mission to get as much pot to the people as possible. Whereas my dad worked exclusively in distribution with only his handful of guys, Candy Can worked for and with the larger group, becoming a chief logistics person wearing a lot of different hats. She likes the alias Candy Can because she was a can-do woman, and she always got whatever job that needed to be done.
We had boats. I would take the typewriter out and write registries and fake addresses and bring ports through. I'd fly to places like Tunisia with $500,000 rolled up in the New York Sunday paper. I would bring weed to the sailors that were waiting to fill up the boats. I'd smuggle into places like Tunisia and Egypt, and if they caught you, I remember the guy was holding up my bag and he said, "Did you like John Lennon?" I said, "He died," and it was really bad. And that was the bag that had the pot in it, and he put it down and I walked through.
She gets married, has a daughter, and continues her life as a smuggler.
I've already been married now. I had a kid. My husband started doing cocaine. It was bad, really bad. And we were in Florida, and at this point, I had rented a series of houses on the lagunas, and we'd have boatloads coming up from Colombia. And we had cigarette boats that would go from the boat to the dock, the boat to the dock. And my daughter learned how to walk around on bales because...
Hot bales.
Yeah, because the house was so filled. We're talking twin vans that would carry 1,000 pounds each out a day. Sometimes we'd have 3 vans that looked exactly the same so the neighbors wouldn't suspect. And I was the front. I rented all the houses under aliases and my beautiful daughter, and I was a great actress. Time goes on. I've been working this profession now from Florida. Then we moved. Everybody wanted to come to California. Florida's nice. Colombian weed is good. Thai weed is better. I mean, we had the black whack. There were times that I'd get on an airplane with these